Hello. I haven't done any evening uh, town halls on my computer since I got a new computer. I apologize. You're getting a little bit of my archiving of files back here because it's about that time of year where I go through an archive. And I know you're very interested in that bag over there underneath my cardigan that is some mealworms for our lawn duck. I've had multiple people reach out to me and say, tell us what's going on with Ballot Initiative 1. So I'm going to do a read of it. I haven't read it yet. I just printed this out about 5 minutes ago. It's still warm from my toner. And so the summary is, do you want to change Maine election laws to eliminate 2 days of absentee voting, prohibit requests for absentee ballots by phone? Sorry, I moved my glasses. My eyes get tired at the end of the day if I don't leave them on for some of my work. So prohibit requests for absentee ballots by phone or family members, and ongoing absentee voter status for seniors and peoples with disabilities. Ban prepaid postage on absentee ballot return envelopes. Limit the number of drop boxes and require voters to show certain ID before voting, and make other changes to our elections. Just that read of it makes me very not interested in having this pass. So let's go through and see what's actually changing. So, you know a little bit about me if you've seen these before. If you haven't seen these before, I've run for Congress in the past. I may or may not run for office again. We'll see where the universe takes me. I'm a practicing attorney. I work in family law. My husband is a boat captain, so he's gone a lot. And I work with a pretty healthy cross section of the population in Maine, just because of my job and what I do. So I'm looking through it, and what they've done in this voter. So this is the referendum election guide, that about 40 pages you can get online at the Secretary of State's office. And I'm going through and just looking at the statutes. I only have time to read one today. I don't have the ability to read two as well. And I'm going to hit some sort of high level stuff. I'm not going to hit every single change. I think that once you have enough information that you know that something is bad, you just vote no. And I said that when I was running for Congress too. If I have figured out that this is just bad on its surface, I don't need to get all the way through a bill. If it's disqualified, it's disqualified. So we're going to look through this and see if it would meet my taste test for what passes being palatable to have as law. So I'm already a little concerned once we get to, you have to present photo identification every time you vote. Here's the thing. We have virtually no voter fraud in Maine. And if we're presenting photo ID, you already have to do a lot of that when you register to vote in the first place. One of the primary sources of identification to be able to register to vote, and what most people use, by and large, the vast majority of people use to register to vote, is their driver's license in Maine. And so you've already presented photographic evidence in almost every case to go ahead and register to vote to begin with. And it's wanting to have photo identification each time you vote. And what that means is you dash out of the house and you forget your wallet, and it's right before you can't vote. They can't just say, oh, you know what, Jenny, we know you, go ahead and vote. I don't know about you. I live in Rangeley. We don't have a whole lot of people. The registrar knew who I was basically from the moment I moved here. Before I lived in Rangeley, I lived in Portland. And in Portland, which is the most populated city in all of Maine, they break you up into different voting sections. And there they knew who I was. And I'm completely forgettable. I am not an interesting person. I am very boring. I am not memorable. And yet they would know who I was from before when I ever ran for office. Probably by the second time I voted, they knew who I was. So we have some crackerjack clerks in Maine. I don't love that you have to present photo identification. That on its face isn't the most offensive part likely of this bill from what the first part says. I think that, there's some merits to asking for photo identification, but I think it's also trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. I think it also causes some real problems when you're doing photo identification with what if Nana wants to vote and her ID expired, but she doesn't drive and everybody knows who she is. She's in a small town. Um, you know, what if she doesn't have a valid photo ID? What if there have been changes and there's a problem with your photo ID? What if you pull your photo ID out and go, oh my God, it expired last month, but I've been running kids' soccer practice and work, and I should be caught up. But, should you lose your right to vote over that? I don't know. I think there's some real merit in it. If you'd asked me 20 years ago how I felt about photo ID, I wouldn't say that I was significantly more conservative, but I probably would have been much more passionate about it. I didn't know as much about all the steps that our state and states generally take to prevent voter fraud. I didn't realize how rare voter fraud was. I hadn't run for office. I'd held office, but it was appointed, not elected. And I did not sort of see the inner workings of running for office and how our elections are run. And I didn't realize that they're pretty secure. They're actually really secure. We have, compared to a lot of places in the world, we basically have near zero, if it's not statistically zero, for voter fraud. It is incredibly rare. So other changes. So we get down to section 2, and it's challenge ballots for voters without photo identification. It says, if a voter does not have or is unable to present photographic verification, an election official shall challenge the voter's right to vote. They can cast a provisional ballot. Again, this puts a lot of work on our clerks who already know who their voters are. I mean, when I moved to Rangeley, I'd put in for an absentee vote, I think for my first vote here, because I wasn't going to be able to get in that day. And the town hall actually called me and they were like, hey, are you going to vote? We haven't gotten your absentee vote in. And, we just want to make sure everybody gets in before 8. So again, these folks know who you are. They are very aware. Maybe some of the problems we're trying to solve are problems that don't exist, certainly don't exist here. So, the provisional ballot, I do think you should have a provisional ballot if you're going to require photo ID, but that doesn't solve the underlying problem of, what if Nana wants to vote and her ID is expired? What if you pull out your ID and it's expired? What if you forgot it at home? What if you walked over and didn't drive over? So there's it's trying to solve a problem that doesn't really exist. It wouldn't impact me for the most part. I've always got my ID on me and it's always current, but I can see where it would create problems and would disenfranchise people. Not the biggest part from, again, the initial read of the paragraph that describes it of the bill, but I don't know that I'd want to put a lot of energy into that. I'm going to skip through most of the challenge ballot stuff. There's some things about religious objections. I think that you have to have ballot challenge language in there if you're going to prevent people from voting if they don't have an ID. So, I think that those are good provisions if you were going to vote for the bill. I think that probably is unnecessary because I think the bill already is probably unnecessary. There's a provision for a free non-driver identification cards for photographic identification. I also think that if you're going to require ID that you should make that free. But the problem with that is, anybody who lives in rural Maine knows this, you have to go get it. And our clerks are not empowered to create those IDs. I actually think that would be something really nice that Maine could do, is not make you go to a sort of centralized facility and sort of decentralize it. Our clerks are pretty trustworthy. There's not very many scandals of clerks. Every once in a while you hear one, but not a whole lot. I think it would be great if the clerks for the individual municipalities could issue IDs and maybe even driver's licenses. But if you live in rural Maine and had to go in person to get any kind of photographic ID, that it is not a quest without its challenges. And if you aren't a driver, which we're going to presume that most of this is for, because it's for non-driver identification cards, so you're already relying on somebody to give you a ride. And unless you just happen to be walking distance from one of the places where they will issue a driver's license or ID, that is very burdensome. So from Rangeley, as the closest place, maybe Mexico. Last time I I had to have a photo taken to renew my ID. Was before I moved to Rangeley. They were able to reuse the photo when I changed my address. So I don't know. I think it's probably a solid hour from Rangeley. So think of the logistics that would be necessary if one of my neighbors who doesn't drive needed an ID. They would have to find somebody to drive them an hour there, an hour back. They would also have to have the time while they were there. I don't know if there's a long line. There may or may not be. Sometimes, even in Portland, when I would go there, it was pretty short lines, but they could get long. I mean, sometimes they're a little longer. That's quite a burden on whoever is helping you as a driver. And I think we would all like to think that we have a community, we have friends, we have family that would do that drive for us. But that's a burden, particularly if you're in a community with a lot of elderly citizens. And there's nothing in here that I can see that, let's see, is there anything in here? I'm going to read a little bit further. I don't see, there's nothing in here that helps with the logistics of that. That is a burden. And that's a burden that's going to be disproportionately felt by the elderly, by people with disabilities. That's a worry. Think about the people in your life who don't have a driver's license. They are the ones who are most likely to not have a valid photo ID, most likely. So, those are people who are elderly, they're in nursing homes, or maybe they're disabled. They don't have the capacity to go get one in almost all cases, because it's very challenging to get around Maine anywhere. I mean, maybe Bangor, maybe Lewiston, Auburn, maybe Portland, but that's about it for any sort of regular bus service that you can count on. So you're talking about rural people having to drive a pretty extensive period of time to go get an ID. So I don't like that. I don't like putting a burden on people who already have a really hard life. I think we should be nicer to our neighbors than that. And I think that a lot of them already registered to vote before they came into whatever problem they have, whether it's just they've aged and not bothered to renew their photo ID, or if they became disabled. Some people start out that way, some people become that way. An awful lot of us will have periods in our life where we need a little extra help, or may not be able to drive at some point in time. So I don't like the burden. That makes me uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable as somebody who thinks everybody who can vote and has capacity to vote should vote. That's something that came from being raised in a fairly conservative, quite Republican household, that it is your civic duty to vote, and if you can, you should. So I think that puts some limitations. Don't love that. Okay, so then it requires absentee ballots, how you can submit them. And it looks like there's some language stricken. It says a municipality may obtain and install a secure Dropbox. Dropboxes are great. I don't know why there's so much hate on them. I think they're fantastic. It would mean that after court, when the city hall had closed, I could drop mine off on the way home. It was much more secure than sending it through the post office. Loved that. So secure Dropbox that meets the requirements of this section. The secure Dropbox may be used by voters. And it says who are authorized, and it strikes the who are authorized. So I think that leaves a pretty big question mark about who's authorized. I'm not going to necessarily reference it, but my initial concerns on that, because it references other subsections, and I don't want you to watch me flipping through too many pages. That's a bother. So, I would question, does this mean that I can't drop off my husband's ballot, for example? So my husband is a boat captain, and when he's on the boat, he'll often leave a ballot with me. Either he'll request it, or if he doesn't have internet, sometimes I have the ability to request it for him. He fills it out when he's home and off the boat. And then if he's not home for the election, I'll drop it off. I'll drop both of ours off. That's a very common thing in Maine. Nothing sketchy about it. It's just my spouse, household member. Why would two people drive there? That's sort of wasteful. And certainly we do not always vote the same. So I don't love that. I question that. Then it's talking about the number of drop boxes. It has to be located out of sight of a, so it said municipal office building or building where the person absentee voting takes place before an election. It gets rid of that. It changes it to office of registrar or on the property of the office of registrar is located. That seems a little fussy. I don't know if you've used any of our Dropbox, but they're all pretty secure. They're at least as secure as a mailbox. And then it strikes a whole bunch of language and says you can only have one Dropbox. And I don't know, in the smaller towns, I don't know, they only usually have one. Rangeley has one Dropbox. It's not big enough to have more than one, I think. I guess there could be one over in Aquasic, but I haven't actually checked. I'm presuming the only one is the one outside of Rangeley's town hall. But I don't see a problem if a larger and more populous municipality wants to have more than one. I know in Portland it would get pretty close to full. They'd have to open it and empty it pretty regularly. Just seems logistical. I don't know why 2 boxes would be less secure than one if a municipality wanted that. And I think it also takes away a lot of freedom from the municipalities to sort of run their own show. And if you've ever dealt with more than one municipality in Maine, you know they all run a little different. So I really don't, for the amount of money we don't pay our clerks, I would not want to give them any more logistical hurdles than are necessary. So it seems like that's some logistical hurdles they don't need. Again, we generally have very dedicated clerks. A lot of them are making less than they could make at Five Guys Burger and Fries. I want to be kind to them because they're doing a really necessary job that doesn't pay particularly well. During the absentee voting period only, so it used to be the municipal clerk or designees. It now says a bipartisan team of election officials. That's annoying. I get what they're trying to do there, but that requires you to have either volunteers or people who are there for your municipality. And a lot of our towns in Maine are not very high population. So this is getting a lot of people to volunteer. And there's already a lot of places in Maine where when you're trying to get somebody to volunteer, good gravy, just trying to get somebody on the school board, it's chucking names at it, trying to get anybody to volunteer because it's a lot of work to do these things. So it requires a bipartisan team of election officials to do that. I don't love that you need to make this political. I don't love that you need to make sure that you have a Democrat and a Republican. What about independents? What about Greens? There might not be enough of those in that area, or they might be excluded. Why are they excluded from it? Why is this 2-team? Maine has a lot of independents, not as many Greens, but we have a lot of independents. That makes me really uncomfortable because we already have, and this is kind of one of my beefs, we already as taxpayers are funding for the parties, their primaries through our elections. And, they should probably cover that cost themselves. But I digress. We're already doing a lot of bowing to the parties. And as somebody who is an independent and has been an independent for decades, I'm technically unenrolled in the state of Maine, there's an independent party here. But as somebody who is an independent voter, that sort of frosts my cupcakes. I already feel like we have too much stuff going with the parties, like they have too much control, like they got a whole lot going on and more in common with each other than the rest of us. I don't like that. I think that clerks it's a nonpartisan office, that we have the right to fire our clerks if we don't think they're doing a good job. And I think most of them do a really good job. So I don't like that. Okay, so the next thing it talks about is periodic retrieval of ballots. Goes back to having a bipartisan team, same problems. The next language goes back to bipartisan teams. So again, the next few sections, it's 14 sections. Sections 13, 14, 15, 14, 15 do it? No, just 13, 14. Puts everything to the bipartisan team. I don't like the bipartisan team. I don't think it's good. Oh, it's actually in 15 too. Let's go to section, so number 3, request an absentee ballot. All right, so requires an ID. That's a bother. So right now, if you've requested an absentee ballot, I didn't for this upcoming election, but I do a lot. Sometimes I know I'm going to be across the state doing a trial, or I know I'm not going to be able to be there. I also really like, if there's a lot on the ballot, being able to take it home, to Google it, to look through stuff, to make sure that I'm doing my own research and I'm making an informed, wise, and judicious vote. I don't like going into an election with 10 pages of things I need to vote on and trying to keep track of them all. I like to take my time when I vote. I like to have a cup of tea. I like to read. I like to maybe phone a friend and ask them how this impacts them. I like to ask a couple of neighbors if it impacts them. I like to be a more well-rounded voter. So I don't like that it looks like now you have to upload your driver's license to the website maybe. So right now you can request your ballot online, and I don't think you have to upload your driver's license. I don't remember doing that. It's possible. I don't have the form up in front of me. It's been quite a few months since I did it, but I think you just tell them who you are and verify your address and your name, and it comes to you in the mail. I have never heard of there being fraud through this. I've always had a ballot show up when I've asked for one. I've never had one go missing. My personal preference is usually that I will have the ballot mailed to me, and then I will drop it off in one of the, either in hand to the clerk, or I'll put it in one of the boxes. I don't like the idea of uploading my photo ID to the internet. I know a lot of people feel safe with that. Maybe it's just me feeling really like Gen X and not liking a lot of the surveillance stuff. It rubs me the wrong way to have to upload my ID to anything. Particularly when they've already seen my ID and they know who I am, and it seems redundant and uncomfortable. Let's see. Most of this stuff is fine language, that you're a voter, that they desire the absentee. That's fine. That there is a mechanism if somebody helps you vote. That's fine. Some people have impairments and they need help. Ballot wishes to be delivered or returned by a third person. You have to designate them. That seems like a lot. I think as long as you've got your thing all sealed and somebody's taking it for you and it's somebody you trust, I don't see why there's a problem letting somebody else sort of be your emissary. The application to receive an absentee ballot must be delivered not before January. Not earlier than 90 days. Seems, I don't know how different that is from the current language, so I would have to check that. Application by electronic means. Yep, it keeps wanting the identification. Issuance of absentee ballots. Let's read through this. Most of that language is fine. Most of this language is fine. A lot of the stuff is stuff that you would put in to protect you if there were, if they're putting in some of the protections they need. I think that the problem is the protections they're putting in aren't necessary. All right, so they're wanting you to swear that it's a Class D crime. I think we already have voter fraud laws, so maybe it's redundant, but it doesn't seem that bad. Ballot delivered to the voter. And there's just some things about making sure there's quality control in there. I don't know. Main driver's license or non-driver identification card number, a copy of it. Okay, so let's talk about what it takes for most people to come up with a photocopy. Now, I'm an attorney. I have a copy machine in my office too, in fact, in case one breaks, because I'm neurotic like that. Most people don't have that. Most people don't have a printer at home, particularly the sort of people who would not have a driver's license. They couldn't easily acquire one. So in order to vote, you have to put your driver's license number on there, and then you have to include a copy of your photo ID. When I was helping people register to vote, I would take a picture of their ID and print it out, because most people, one of the things they had is they didn't have a way to send a photocopy in easily. And so I was happy to help with that. Again, I was following all the proper procedures. I'm an attorney. I'm very trustworthy. If I do anything sketchy, I can get in all sorts of trouble. So of course I was matching things up and deleting copies that I didn't keep copies of people's ID, but I, printed them out, matched them up to the cards and sent them in. That was something that a clerk had actually suggested would really help them with their job. And I was happy to accommodate that. But most people don't have the ability to make a photocopy. A lot of people have home printers. A lot of people don't. Not everybody who has a printer has a scanner. If you take pictures on your phone, there's variance in qualities. Not everybody has a camera phone. My 14-year-old certainly doesn't. Again, we're putting burdens on people, and I do not think we should put burdens on citizens if they do not achieve some sort of reasonable goal. So, all the other rest of this stuff is fine. Timely delivery of absentee ballots. Sure, yeah, they need to be in on time. Some other procedural stuff, I'm going to skip most of that. Some of these changes aren't particularly meaningful. They really want you to put your main voter driver or your main voter's main driver's license or non-driver identification card number and a copy of the photographic ID in there. That's burdensome. I don't like that. All right, so let's talk about what else is going on here. So, let's see. There's fiscal impact statement. There's public comments. So let me kind of go back and look at some of this stuff because I had heard some stuff that I want to check and see is actually in there. So it looks like some of the things that I had heard just from people gossiping. People gossip in Maine. That's probably one of our primary exports. One of the things I love in family law is you can be down in Portland and be hearing about stuff happening in people's families up in Presque Isle. So prohibits requests for absentee ballots by phone or family members. So that one's one that's really important to my family because sometimes my husband will be out at sea and he has no data because he's on a boat in the middle of the water, nowhere near anything. And sometimes their internet works and sometimes it's broken for several weeks. I think there's some real problems if you have, vets or people who are merchant Marines. Maine has a lot of merchant Marines proportionate to our population. That can really impact their ability to vote. We have a lot of people that travel for work. It can impact their ability to vote, particularly if they get stuck away. Right now, we have the ability to sort of call up and explain that there's a problem. And again, the clerks all know us. So if you don't know your clerks, you probably aren't going and doing enough stuff at the town halls. Even after I did the first thing at a town office, they knew who I was. They just have incredible memories. Bans prepaid postage. I didn't see that in here, but it might have been one of the pieces that was struck and you have to cross-reference. So I think if you ban prepaid postage on ballot return envelopes, you are doing two things. That's equivalent to a poll tax, making somebody pay extra to vote. But more importantly, if you are somebody who needs an absentee vote because you are disabled or elderly, you may not have access to stamps easily. And that makes it so it's very difficult to vote. Limit the number of drop boxes. We covered that. Require voters to show ID before voting. We covered that. So, there's a few other pieces in here that I didn't go through line by line. I didn't look up and cross-reference some of the sections that were struck, so there might be more in there. But on its face, there's just not enough for me to vote for this. I want secure elections, but our elections are secure. We're putting a lot of resources into fixing something that's not broken. We could have put the resources to put this referendum on the ballot. How many tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent? I didn't check the reporting to see, but I bet it would have been enough to fund our food banks for a little while, and we're going to need that coming up. So I think that this is a whole lot of resources expended towards something that looks like it's trying to fix a problem we don't have, and in the process of fixing a problem that we don't have, I think it limits people. This could take Nana's vote away. This could take somebody with disabilities vote away. It could limit my husband's vote if he's out working and he can't get here. So I would definitely not vote for this. I'm not voting for it. Obviously, make your own decisions. Read through the language. Make sure you're making a wise and judicious choice. Make sure you're informed into your vote. But my vote is no, and I think those are the reasons why. If you have any questions, you can always shoot me an email. I'm on Blue Sky, Threads. I really don't check into Facebook because I have enough drama in family law. But if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. My inbox is always open, and make sure you vote next week.